Hello, I'd just like to preface this video by saying that since I will be talking about horror films and games, which do contain their fair share of violent content, I may discuss some in this video. I'll try to avoid talking about anything too graphic or vulgar, but it might come up once or twice. Anyways, on with the video! On January 1st, 2024, Mickey Mouse finally entered the mystical land known as the public domain. Along with it came a lot of media capitalizing on the fact that the world's most famous mouse was now free to use. On the same day that Mickey entered the public domain, several horror projects were announced, including a horror game and two different horror movies. And now, a year late, a lot of these have been released, so I'm going to look at some of them. There were two horror films announced on January 1st, with one of them announcing with a trailer. So basically the movie was already filmed, which doesn't explain why this thing took 8 months to release. So yeah, Mickey's Mousetrap was released on August 6th, 2024 on digital platforms, and it even had a name change, since now it's just called The Mousetrap. Which was probably done so that Disney's lawyers wouldn't come knocking. So was this film worth the wait in the name change? Well, let's find out. Personally, I think this movie is kind of bland. I haven't seen pretty much any horror films outside the two that I'm talking about here, but even still I could tell that this film was pretty by the numbers, and the story leaves a lot to be desired. First off, the characters are really weakly developed. They are all pretty much one-note characters with one defining character trait, like there's two male characters, a nerd and a jock, who spend the entire movie pining after the main character Alex. The nerd's really nice to her to win her over, while the jock is a douche to everyone and assumes that she must like him. Outside of this love battle, there really isn't anything remotely compelling from any of the other characters. The first people to meet their end at the hands of Mickey are a couple who do absolutely nothing notable before they exit the story, and there's two characters who I completely forgot existed in between character appearances, and I was very confused on who they were when they showed up again. The most memorable character is probably Rebecca, who is a character chosen to appear in intermittent segments throughout the film, presenting her as retelling the movie's events to two police officers interrogating her as the sole survivor. The only reason I think she sticks out more is because she's brought to the forefront a lot, and also is in the post-credit sequel bait, but we'll get onto that later. Now, I feel that any film that decides to utilize a beloved character in the way that these public domain slasher films are, need to at least justify the presence of the character. Especially since unlike other public domain reinterpretations, these films intentionally personify the characters in a way that goes against the original character's philosophy and the creator's intentions. The Mousetrap doesn't justify this aspect at all. The film doesn't build off of the original Steamboat Willie at all, aside from the obvious Mickey Mouse iconography, and showing clips of Steamboat Willie in the opening titles and within some scenes. The plot and characters don't have anything to do with Steamboat Willie, both in terms of the plot or the things involved. And I would be surprised if those behind this film had even watched the full cartoon all the way through, because that short is full of things that could be turned into an effective horror film. So there are very little things in this film that I liked, but there were some things. I liked the British boss in the one scene he was in before being turned into a Mickey Mouse murderer. He did seem to play off the two other actresses in the scene very well, although I might just like him because he's British, and Doctor Who probably made me positively associate with British actors. So yeah, as you could probably guess, I wasn't very impressed by the movie, as was much of the internet that saw it, which didn't seem to be that many people. I remember when the film was announced, the trailer seemed to be plastered everywhere, with it amassing an impressive number of views in a short amount of time. But this spotlight seemed to fade the longer between January 1st and the film coming out, to the point that I didn't even realise that it had been released, even though I was somewhat looking out for it, because no one was talking about it at all. I feel like this will be an issue with a lot of these public domain slasher films. After the film is announced and everyone gets to laugh about Mickey Mouse holding a knife for a bit, the world will then move on and the film won't get much attention when it comes out, especially if it's like The Mousetrap and there's nothing notable for people to latch onto. Well, despite this, apparently the movie was successful enough that a sequel is currently in development. This was set up in the first movie, since there was a post-credit scene of Mickey releasing Rebecca from her prison cell, implying that the two are working together. The movie is going to be titled Welcome to the Mickeyverse, and is at least partially funded through an Indiegogo campaign, which raised just over 8,000 Canadian dollars. That might sound like a lot, but in terms of movie money, that's barely anything, so I'm sure the second film will be the same low-budget dull film as the first. The film will also feature Minnie Mouse, I'm assuming in a similar role to Mickey's. Another Mickey horror film that grabbed some attention was Screamboat. Unlike The Mousetrap, this was just announced with a poster, and the film was most likely yet to be filmed, since the movie was eventually released on April 2nd, 2025, over a year after it was announced. The main reason this particular film seems to rise above the rest in conversation was due to those making the film, since the film shared cast and crew with both The Mean One, the Grinch horror film that was released in 2022, and Terrifier 2 and 3, films whose reputations precede it. The director and producer of Screamboat was also behind The Mean One, and the person playing this film's version of Mickey is David Howard Thornton, who is most well known for his role as Art the Clown in Terrifier. So did this film do Mickey justice where The Mousetrap failed? Let's find out. First off, I like this movie a lot more than The Mousetrap. Unlike that film, Screamboat clearly knew what it was and decided to go the whole way in taking the Mickey out of the absurd premise, deciding to spend the entire movie basically making Disney jokes. There's a group of party girls who are very obviously references to different Disney princesses, both in their appearance and names. Characters quote iconic Disney lines constantly. I lost count of the amount of times a character said a line from something Disney, to the point it kind of did take me out of the movie sometimes. Screamboat also is very referential towards the original Steamboat Willie short and Walt Disney in particular, since in this film, Walt makes an appearance, in a way. A part of Steamboat Willie's backstory in the film revolves around him befriending a steamboat captain in the 1920s, and the captain is named Walt and very closely resembles the man himself. The backstory is also presented through a 1920s-esque animated segment. There's also a very explicit reference to Steamboat Willie, where Mickey steers the boat and whistles the iconic tune, which is a fun way to end a particularly brutal scene. I also very much like the costume and the prosthetics used for Steamboat Willie. You can tell this wasn't a rush job, and there was a lot more care taken into it than The Mousetrap. I preferred the characters in this movie overwhelmingly more than The Mousetrap. Every character was at least somewhat thought out, and most of them had at least some aspirations that influenced them throughout the film. For instance, the main girl, Selena, has dreams to be an artist, which she draws from during the climax of the film to help defeat Steamboat Willie. All of the protagonists are also joined together in a shared theme of belonging, with each of the three main characters either having a strong idea of where they belong or just spending the movie tackling their own perceptions of where they fit in. Just in general, I cared a lot more when the characters in this film died compared to those in The Mousetrap. Just overall, it's clear that the people behind this movie had a vision to act upon, and that they went ahead and tried to make it work as much as possible, to which I would say that it was executed pretty well. Now, one thing that this film has in common with The Mousetrap is that this one also has a mid-credits scene teasing a sequel, which is currently in development. The scene reveals that Minnie Mouse has survived, despite her being thrown off board the boat during a flashback sequence, and her loss being a big reason Steamboat Willie decided to go on a rampage in the first place. The second movie will apparently be called Screamboat 2: Nothing Stays Dead, and that's pretty much all there is to be known right now. Okay, so quickly I also wanted to cover the one Mickey game that made the rounds on January 1st, Infestation Origins. I played a bit of it and it was alright and pretty fun, although it did suffer the same curse as The Mousetrap, that it doesn't do all that much with Steamboat Willie, so it just comes across as a generic game with a Steamboat Willie 3D model imported into the game engine. It also suffers from the hype dying out before the game actually came out, since the game's marketed as a multiplayer game, but when I played it, there was no one else to play it with, so that took away from my experience of the game. So overall, it's a fine game, but there wasn't any reason to have Mickey Mouse in it. So that's my thoughts on some of the Steamboat Willie horror media that's been released. Overall, some good things, mostly or okay things, but I can definitely see why Disney's been so fierce with maintaining Mickey's copyright over the last few decades.